The content you're about to hear may be graphic in nature. Listener discretion is advised.
Oh, how I wonder what it's like to relax. See the sky down under. Hope my plans collapse. Oh, how I'm under the surface of my tears, falling down asunder the meaning of my years.
This is True Crime XS.
I sometimes see sources and I don't know if they're a valid source or not. So I dig into the story a little bit, and I think it's going to get worse. I think AI is going to start writing stories that make no sense. So if something happens with this story down the road, this is my disclaimer. If some of this is wrong, it's very difficult to go through and figure out what angle it came from, but it was presented as a news article to me. And I read it, and it has some weird, interesting things about it where I was like, all right, I want to know, is this real? Is this AI? Like, what's happening? Have you gotten to that point in your reading of crime news or no?
Well, I might be overly confident, but I feel like I can tell the difference.
Well, when you saw this like sex offender thing, did you think this was like, I don't know, real? Or like, did you think it was BS?
Well, for this in particular, I assumed it was probably real, but if it were fake, I wouldn't care enough to, like, I care, but like, it's just one of those things that either it's happening or it's not, and it needs to either be remedied or it doesn't matter, right?
Yeah, but so many things are getting like that. And like, there's so many people, like so many people are commenting on, like when we started doing true crime, there was too many people talking about true crime. But
it's become exponentially worse since then.
Right. And like now I hear them talking and I'm like, what, why do you have this opinion?
Well, so unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess, just depending on how you look at it, I realized that most people don't actually care if it's like if the story is true or not, right?
Right.
They don't care. Like they just want to yap about it for a little bit. I have some examples, but I don't really want to get off track, but it has become a lot. I do think at some point it's going to be, I don't know, so overly saturated that like something's going to have to give. Maybe.
Are we there? Are we close?
I would say we are so far past that, but like I say that, like the genre and the industry says otherwise, right?
Yeah.
And it's almost like it's every man for himself or every
Right.
woman for herself if you're trying to do true crime, okay? And unfortunately, to me, that's going to bring out the worst because you have to do something to distinguish yourself.
Yeah.
And the only way to do that is, you know, the AI generated crime leads or crime stories or whatever. And you would think that there would be a point behind the AI generated things, right? But I realized that that's not necessarily true. Like some things are just done for the sake of having something to put out there.
I think we're headed to a point right now where everybody's going to be an influencer for something. And the people who, like, I don't think there's going to be many people left who aren't influencing something. Like, everybody has a topic. And I jokingly recently said, I don't know how jokingly I was, that we're headed towards a universal basic income with bonuses for how you influence other people. And like the basic income is really just because somebody somewhere is paying for your data.
Well, that is a whole different. That's a whole different show, but you're not wrong about that for sure. There is no standard by which influencers are measured, right?
Yeah, so I'm definitely learning that is the case.
And in order to be an influencer, which, by the way, this is something that like didn't even exist like the majority of my lifetime. Okay.
Right.
You have to actually influence someone. Now,
allegedly. You're supposed
I would say that if you're an influencer who doesn't influence anyone, then you're not really an influencer. You should probably have a different name, right? But the idea behind an influencer, my understanding is that people want to be influencers because then they are paid by companies who have products to be marketed because that person can influence their audience to purchase the products.
Right.
Okay, that's where the whole concept of influencing came from. Now, if you watch any degree of that happening at any point in time anywhere, it doesn't take much to be an influencer.
Right.
And the bids to be an influencer, once you are one, they're only marginally successful. Like for that core meaning that I just said, like where a company pays you to say, hey, I use this, don't you want to use this? You know, largely marketing, like even the way we used to do it back in the 90s, the 2000s, like it only had so much sway regardless. If you ever think about what do you see on TV commercial wise? Now, I realize most people today don't even hardly watch TV. However, even on streaming, there's commercials, right? You see insurance companies, you see car companies, you see big family product producers, right? Like cereal or like laundry detergent or that kind of thing, right? Stuff that you find in every American household. And, you know, it's like Johnson and Johnson, or there's several big conglomerates that make that type of stuff, right? Okay, so all of those industries, they make so much money that they then turn around and fund television. Okay?
Kind of, yeah.
Okay. Don't have to advertise the newest version of their car to sell it. Okay?
Right.
Insurance is required in probably every state. So you are going to pick an insurance company and purchase your car insurance regardless of what you see on TV.
Yeah, I don't even know how any of that works anymore. Like,
okay, well, they have so much money. Well, that's what I'm getting at. The industries that we see commercials for, they had a huge place in our economy because if you think about it, you've got people going into marketing to make commercials to go on television that we then watch. But over time, it was a largely fictitious industry because everything that's being advertised, it requires no advertisement. Okay? Yeah. They literally just put money from that otherwise wouldn't be there into our entertainment industry, right?
Right, yes.
Okay. A lot of people don't grasp that concept, but I feel like we're talking to the ones that do. So
well,
it is largely become it's just a given that like certain pieces of our economy are always going to support the entertainment industry through the funds.
Agreed.
Okay.
I think those I've seen. I don't have cable, so I've seen a lot more AI commercials where it's like pharmaceutical commercials, and I guess commercials for casinos, which has become kind of a new thing in the area that I'm in. But like a lot of the commercials that I do see are on streaming services that I'm getting for free. I don't pay for the ad-free version. Yeah,
Pharmaceuticals is huge. Yeah.
This actually popped up in the middle of one of those. I had this weird thing happen true crime wise where someone that we've talked to on the show several times, they messaged me and asked me about something that was going on, and they had a theory, and their theory was correct. So I kind of cleared my afternoon to do a thing and didn't have to do a lot of it. And this ad popped up. And so I clicked on it, and it took me to this thing called txktoday.com. And I'm still not 100% sure. Like, most of what I'm about to say checks out, but I'm not 100% sure how I got here or how it knew to add me. But I thought I would use this as one of the pieces of true crime news today. The title of it is Registered Sex Offender Runs Historic Washington Wedding Venue and Bed and Breakfast. So I'm going to say that again because we just jumped from ads to this. Registered sex offender runs historic Washington wedding venue and bed and breakfast. The name that's ascribed to having written this on July 3rd, 2026 is Field Walsh, like Field. It starts off with a picture at the top that appears to be taken from the Arkansas registry. But here's the article. A registered sex offender is running Coulter Farmstead, a bed and breakfast and wedding venue in historic Washington that markets itself as the premier wedding venue near Texarkana. The address on the sex offender registration matches the address of the venue. This is according to public records reviewed by the TXK Today staff. And it says this guy's name is listed on the Arkansas Department of Public Safety Sex Offender Registry as a level 2 offender for stalking in the 3rd degree. And then it gives his address, which is the address of this Coulter Farmstead. The guy's name is Justice Lee West, which I can't imagine more ironic name. He's 36 years old at the time of the publication of all this stuff. And it says Coulter Farmstead is an 11-acre property offering overnight stays in restored 1840s cabins and an 1860s Greek Revival main house. It hosts weddings with on-site lodging for up to 30 guests. The venue's website lists this Justice West as a contact and advertises the email address that corresponds with his name and Coulter Farms domain. It says guest reviews repeatedly describe Justice by name as their hosts. Property records list someone named Katie West as the owner of the parcels. The venue is listed on Arkansas.com, the state's official tourism website, as a place to stay in Washington. The property sits surrounded by historic Washington State Park land. So this is Washington, Arkansas, not Washington, D.C., and also not Washington State. West is not violating any law or registration requirement by operating this venue. Arkansas places no residency restrictions on level 2 offenders who must register with the Arkansas Crime Information Center and local law enforcement every 6 months, report address changes at least 10 days in advance. State law bars registrants from jobs and volunteer positions involving direct contact with minors, such as schools, daycares, and youth programs. It does not address owning or operating lodging or event business. Level 2 offender information is typically not posted on Arkansas's public registry. West entry is publicly searchable because state rules make an exception when the offender was 18 or older and the victim was 14 or younger. Nothing in the law requires a lodging or wedding business to disclose an operator's registration status, and nothing in Coulter Farmstead's booking process does. A guest would only find it by searching the registry on their own. Coulter Farmstead is not listed on Airbnb, which prohibits registered sex offenders from hosting and says it screens U.S. hosts against potential public sex offender registries. The property does have an active listing on another site, which has a similar policy barring sex offenders from its platform. Contacting the parent company of that site for comment on the listing. They said they don't get a response, and then down at the bottom they make a correction, which is fine. It says, for the criminal case, Justice West was arrested in November of 2019 after a 14-year-old relative allegedly discovered a hidden camera disguised as a phone charger in a bathroom of a home, according to Hempstead County court records. He was arrested a second time in December 2019 after investigators reported finding images of a nude prepubescent girl in an iCloud storage account identified as belonging to him. Prosecutors filed 2 cases charging him with video voyeurism, a Class D felony. And then in the other case, they charged him with stalking and 2 felony counts of distributing, possessing, or viewing matter depicting sexually explicit conduct involving a child. The video voyeurism charge was null prost, so prosecutors let that go back in March of 2022. In September 2023, 4 years after the arrest, West entered a negotiated guilty plea to stalking in the 3rd degree, which is a Class A misdemeanor out there in Arkansas. The charge covered conduct from December 2018 through December 2019 that had placed the victim under emotional duress and in fear for her safety, according to the amended charging document. The same day the plea was accepted, prosecutors dropped the felonies. His sole conviction is the stalking count. On the sentencing order, the circuit judge involved here wrote that the offense was found to be a sexual offense requiring sex offender registration. West received a suspended imposition of sentence, meaning they don't have to do the jail time yet if they do other things. Got a $2,500 fine, which was paid the same day. The order merged the video voyeurism case into the stalking case and assessed $960 in jury summons cost, indicating jurors had been called before the plea was entered. In 2022, there was a filing signed by the deputy prosecuting attorney stating that a joint stipulation in the case had been reached in part to balance evidentiary concerns and avoid the need to subpoena a reluctant witness. So this guy had been working as an advanced practice registered nurse at a clinic in Arkansas. He had held an Arkansas nursing license since 2011 and had received this nurse practitioner credential in December 2018. 9 days after the arrest and all of this, he signed a voluntary surrender, which means he gave up both of those licenses. The State Board of Nursing accepted the surrender November 19th and a final order stating that voluntary surrender would be the disciplinary action here. On the surrender form, asking for a reason, he wrote, accused of video voyeurism. The board's order allowed West to apply for reinstatement after 1 year or after his criminal case was resolved. According to this article, they're still inactive, and I think one of them had expired in the National Data Bank. There is reporting in here that he is the president of a local school board and a member of a volunteer fire department.
Before his arrest.
Before the arrest, yeah. And he did not respond to a request for comment during publication. This is interesting to me because it brings up some questions. I happen to believe that things like this should not be on the registry unless there's clearly some kind of sexual element to it, which they seem to have evidentiary concerns. And based on what I'm seeing, what I think those concerns are is something crazy was happening somewhere and he used a hidden camera to try and solve it and captured things that made him break the law because he was doing something stupid. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. However, so I have a couple questions. My first question would be, did he realize that he was going to have to register as a sex offender, or was that an afterthought put on the order? Okay. The next thing would be, it says nothing of intent right here.
Right.
It says that a hidden camera was located and that there was cloud storage having pictures, inappropriate pictures, which would have by default been captured on a camera hidden in the bathroom, right?
Correct.
There are some reasons, not that I'm going to justify this, but there could be some story out there where a person put a camera in their own bathroom, in their own home, for a justifiable reason. The one thing that comes to mind, it would be like stolen pills, okay?
Yeah.
Like if you had pills stolen out of your medicine cabinet. Now, when you're thinking, I'm going to catch the dirty thief that stole my pills, it probably didn't occur to you that the other things you're going to get, and that would be wrong, right?
Yeah.
And it sounds to me like there's been like years and years of this happening, which is also kind of strange, but whatever. I'm not entirely sure about any of this. If he was secretly recording young ladies or young men or whomever in the bathroom at his house for kicks and to watch it for improper purposes, that's all very wrong. Okay, he shouldn't be doing it. It's illegal. However, I don't know that that's exactly what was happening here. And I actually feel like in these types of cases, it would be worth it to actually sort it out.
Yeah, I think they should. And I think this was the prosecutor's only option to secure a conviction. So first of all, let me just say something about this like venue they talk about in here for a second. You've been in the last 10 years to a venue that allegedly slept 30 people for a wedding.
Yeah.
You remember what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
I'm not giving away any details because I don't want any of that stuff to be like linked to this. But you and I have this experience where we've gone to this place. Like, there weren't many children there.
Well, and he's not breaking the law in any way, shape, or form by offering it.
Right. Which is what so that's where I'm headed with all this. Why does this become a news article?
Well, if you notice, I don't know if you noticed or not, but it's Phil Walsh is the owner and editor of TexK Today, which I guess is like Texarkana.
Yeah.
And Phil has 13 plus years experience covering news in Texarkana. Okay, so Phil Walsh puts this out, has hit a nugget of gold, apparently. I personally feel like this is just somebody passing along information that is obviously available to anyone. If it were really important for the owner and operator of venues to not be registered sex offenders, it would be a law, right?
Yeah.
Okay, it's not. It also, I feel like this might be one of the, well, I don't know. He is a registered sex offender. However, Phil Walsh did provide all the information. I mean, he did say, like, it is not actually against the law for this to be happening. Okay. Yeah. However, the article itself, the only reason you write something like this is to cause controversy, right?
Right.
And obviously, you are more than welcome to search the sex offender registry that's available, which I'm pretty sure every state has one. I'm pretty sure. Publicly searchable. And if you're going to go partake in a venue somewhere, you're more than welcome to look up, make sure the person's not registered, right? I'd love to know how this came about.
I'm wondering if he didn't like have a bad experience at the wedding venue, and like this is how he's decided to use this minor level of influence. And the other thing I wondered was, how did this end up on my clicks? Like, how did I get there?
I think it's because we talked about sex offenders recently.
Interesting.
Like, we talked about the sex offender brigades that are all felons.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Because, and they do have some of those in Arkansas. You're right. That's interesting.
That was my guess when you initially brought it to my attention. I don't know what the point of this is. I would say that it's a factual based article, right? Because it checks out. But, and I don't know about the whole sex offender thing. It's just, to me, really, this would be a perfect example of how, like, even though he took a deal and, like, justice happened or whatever, like, he's still paying for this, right? I mean, if anybody looks at this. But I don't think that this is going to matter too much, honestly. Unless you've got minors renting the venue for some reason, which I don't think is the intent, right? The man's got to make a living somehow. So it looks like he's followed all the laws as required, and he may be getting kicked off of Verbo.
Yeah, I didn't mention them because of that, but I don't think you should be kicked off of anywhere. I am a little dubious of this first place because it doesn't sound like the prosecutor did their job. And the more I read about that county out there, the less I'm convinced.
Well, and obviously a victim is a victim is a victim, but if you found the camera and then you found what you expected to be on the cloud footage, however, the guy forgot he had put it there and had never reviewed the cloud footage, then has a crime really been committed?
You know what? I think more and more about that with all the cameras that people have on their homes that they never really necessarily look at the footage.
Yeah, like how many crimes are we all committing?
Right. Yeah, like what if a kid runs through the neighborhood
naked
and they're naked and they're caught on your doorbell camera and their parent is chasing them trying to put their diaper on? Like, does that make you guilty? Because you would own the cloud footage, right? Of the kid running down the street. And I know it's not for sexual nature. I'm being tongue in cheek here, but like, I don't understand the whole concept of including everything that happens in the bathroom as a sexual nature. And that's what they did here, putting this guy on the registry. Or is this like circuit court judge just wrong?
That's what I wondered. And he didn't have great I feel like, okay, this is just my little 2 cents. It's not actual legal advice. However, in the event that a plea has been struck in lieu of a trial,
and they suddenly want to throw you on the registry?
Well, see, I feel like that had to have been negotiated ahead of time, but I don't know that it was the way it was written. However, I'm just saying, like, there was not enough evidence here to actually convict him. I don't know anything about the case. I'm talking about the dynamics of how it played out. I would say that the prosecutor wanted a win, and this was the only way he was able to get it. Meaning, if Justice Lee West had said, I'm not taking a plea, let's go to trial, and held out, because he pled the day of the trial, right? He got taxed the jury summons cost. So if he had held out, I think the prosecutor would have been forced to drop the charges.
I think that's where we were headed with this, and he really should have held out. But it's hard. It is hard to hold out that last step.
Well, and you've got to have an attorney on board, a defense attorney on board that's willing to do it. Now, I'm not saying like I said at the beginning, it's just, this is my perception of what occurred. I do think, and I think that the prosecution justifies it in their thinking by saying, well, if he really hadn't done anything wrong, he wouldn't have taken the plea, right? Which is not true. That's simply not true. I think people fold under pressure, and you have to be a very strong person to fight back against like a state prosecution, right? You just do. And I'm not saying that it never happens, but like there's a lot of pressure. And at the end of the day, the defense attorney typically turns on their own client and says, like, you really need to take this plea. And if you could just say, like, I really need to go to trial, the prosecutor is going to have to stand up there and say, look, the evidence we ended up having in this case and the prosecuting witness, like, we don't have it to show you here today at trial, right?
Yeah.
And then, of course, the case is going to be dismissed. And usually prosecutors don't go tell a judge that. Usually prosecutors will dismiss the charges before they have to stand before a judge and say that, because it's not, charges should be way more serious than I feel like a prosecutor would be taking them in a case where this was the outcome. However, I welcome anyone going to a venue to always find the owner operator and look them up on the sex offender registry, look at the status, look at what they did, and make your own decision as to whether or not you want to be, a patriot of that business or not. It's completely everyone's own decision. But as
Agreed.
of the way the legislation is now, this man hasn't broken any laws. So, like a journalist should do, Phil Walsh put it out there. He put all the information, and a few more people will now know that he is a sex offender that may not have known previously. And, that's part of what we do here in America. Now, is this really true crime, though?
I have some unfortunate news for Field Walsh.
Oh,
So I watched this on a variety of, I read this, and it has these moving ads on it. And I looked at it on a variety of devices over the last couple of days where I was debating if I wanted to address this at all. He seems to run entirely on advertising dollars that he seems to be curating them. And unfortunately, the ads for Harvest Food Bank of Arkansas and the ads for Texarkana contractors, in case those people happen to come across this some way, shape, or fashion and wonder why were these ads not successful, it's because the framing of these ads in iPad form and television form, as well as on the iPhone, make the pictures associated with the Harvest Food Bank ads and the Texarkana contractors ads appear to be Justice West and his wife. Because if you swipe through to the left, you see a picture of Justice West that's taken from the sex offender registry. The next photo that you swipe past is a picture of a similarly looking bearded man and a woman that says Harvest Regional Food Bank all the way down at the bottom right in a way that you can barely read it. And the third photo is just another similarly situated bearded man and a woman right after the words about the property parcel. So if you read it, you assume this is Justice West and Katie West. And if you don't swipe again, you don't know that that is actually an ad because they all look the same. The people do.
I can say that on iMac running, I think I'm on Chrome, the ads have been removed for some reason. It may just be my thing, but there are no ads.
I just thought, wow, this guy he has a 3-for-1 I'm ruining businesses today blog going on here. And
well, it is, it's his prerogative to do so. It's just so interesting to me where I don't know. Do you have to really ask? Can we really fault anyone for putting sex offenders on display? Well, no, I guess not. Right? Is it really what we want to be doing with our time? Well, not my time, right? Not necessarily. Now,
except for the 2 hours on a Sunday morning that I make you. Sorry about that.
No, but. Well, there was a point to this. It's a topic for discussion, right?
Right.
But would there be something to this if, he couldn't put the paragraph in there where it says, he's not breaking the law, right? Is it important to have that enforced? Well, I think, yeah, it is. Because the proper pathway would be, to have sex offenders actually be sex offenders and actually have to follow the rules of what that means, right?
Right.
And this goes back to stuff I say all the time. For example, if everything's a red card, nothing's a red card.
Exactly. That's where the sex offender registry is today. It's all a red flag. Everything's a red flag.
And if the sex offender registry, if everyone's a sex offender, no one's a sex offender. If everything's a sexual assault, nothing's a sexual assault. And I feel we should always keep that in mind because this just, it kind of brings attention to like a nothing burger. A sex offender is doing something a sex offender is allowed to do, right?
Right. And the point is not to keep punishing someone further, which is ultimately how the registries we have in the United States work. They just work as being a felon, being a sex offender, all those things just work these days as a way to further punish someone who's already been punished.
Well, I think they're also, okay, yes, you're right. That's how they work. What they're supposed to do is to keep the surrounding community safer, right? Now, in this situation, if you did not use the bathroom in this man's home, you were in no danger.
Yeah.
Okay,
and
now.
That's a good point.
Well, I mean, unless there's something to it I'm not understanding, right? For one, I would have fought this case. You can put cameras anywhere you want to in your home. Now, I don't know, I don't know the ins and outs of this case in particular, right?
Right.
And somebody felt victimized, and perhaps it was warranted. I don't know, but this is a case that I'm not even sure he should have been charged to begin with, much less still be on the sex offender registry. However, if he wants to not be on the registry, he needs to go through the process of doing that, right?
Well, he doesn't seem, this guy, no, he didn't comment on this.
No, I'm just saying that, we have a story here of a man that's on the sex offender registry doing stuff a sex offender is allowed to do.
Right. But you said that he should go through the process of getting off the sex offender registry. He does not appear, he may not even be aware this exists, except for the fact that they asked for him for his comment.
If he
we're
wants
running an article about the fact that you're on a list. Do you want to comment about being on the list?
If he wants to get, I'm not saying what I'm saying means he should be off the list. I'm saying If he were to want to be off the list, he should go through a process and do that. I'm not saying just because I feel like the story might lack teeth. I'm just giving my opinion because we're talking about it. I'm with you. But again, I can't help but say this man, if you didn't use the bathroom at his house, you were in no danger. So should he really be on a sex offender registry when the point of a sex offender registry is to alert the public at large, the community, when someone who has committed a grievous sexual offense moves into the neighborhood, right?
Right.
I don't think that applies here. However, he is on the sex offender registry. Therefore, it is what it is. And I thoroughly appreciate Field Wash doing the research and putting out this information in a mostly unbiased form, except is it biased just based on the information?
Field, what are you not telling us? I reached out to Field Wash for this story, but I don't know that he ever saw it. He definitely did not return the opportunity to comment. I just want to point that out. So that was one of the pieces of true crime news. And for those of you who don't know, we're kind of in the South, sort of. And there's a heat wave going on here that we can barely talk
it is
at this
so
point.
Hot. Oh my gosh.
It's been going on for a while. So that's the reason we've been bouncing around. We've been working on longer form stories. We've been working on the holiday series. That's the reason we're doing kind of a more low-key story today. And we're also always experimenting on you guys with the episodes that we put out. We want to see who likes what and who doesn't like it. So that happens. But I have to tell you, this is the weirdest thing I've heard about. Did you see what I sent you about what's going on in Louisiana right now?
Yes, a couple of things.
So I have never been so confused by politics and the law colliding, I don't think. I don't know, maybe I have. Then whatever is going on right now in Louisiana. And I say that because, okay, so I think most people know how things work in terms of the hierarchy in a state. But Louisiana has their first female attorney general right now, which I think that counts as a big deal in the South. Maybe I'm wrong. She is Republican, so people are really down on conservative people today because they associate negative things with the conservative side of stuff. We don't bring up a lot of politics here, so this is not really political. I'm looking at some things that they just confuse me. So this person, her name is Elizabeth Murrell. So she is a politician and a lawyer, and as I said, she's a member of the Republican Party. She's been serving as the 46th Attorney General of Louisiana since January 2024. She grew up in Louisiana. She grew up in Lafayette. Her parents were a doctor and a professor down there. She attended really nice schools along the way. She did all of the things that you expect someone to do preparing for kind of a high-profile career. She's in sorority. She gets a bachelor's degree in journalism. She works at a newspaper and kind of turns on that and decides that she's going to become a lawyer. So she ends up getting her law degree, and she focuses in along the way on a variety of things career-wise that kind of lend her to the Republican Party. She was even a fellow of the United States Supreme Court. She got her Master of Laws degree as well from Pepperdine University School of Law. She clerked for a couple of famous judges, and she became the Solicitor General of Louisiana in 2015. So the Solicitor General is a chief representative of the government in court. That's what they are. In 2023, Jeff Landry decides that he's going to run for governor instead of running for re-election as the Attorney General of Louisiana. And Liz Murrell is basically, she announces, and she's put in the kind of the secession order. So she's going to succeed him as Attorney General in the 2023 election. So she does end up in a runoff. So she ends up defeating Lindsey Cheek, who was on the other side of that runoff, by almost 68% of the vote. And that ends up making her the first woman to serve as Attorney General. She has some really weird views on things related to capital punishment, to abortion, immigration. I don't agree with all of them. But whether I agree with her or not, she ends up in this strange position where in July of 2026, she gets indicted by a grand jury in New Orleans. So she ends up being accused of intimidating city officials, including New Orleans Mayor Helena Moreno. So what's interesting about Helena Moreno, even though she's the mayor of New Orleans right now, she's a journalist. She's a member of the Democratic Party. She's threatening to remove these people from their jobs if they continue to oppose certain state laws, including a state law that eliminates a position that had previously been held by a man named Calvin Duncan. So Calvin Duncan is a long-term American legal advocate. He is a prison rights activist. He has a very interesting story that we could do probably a whole series on. So she gets indicted, and then an arrest warrant is issued for her, and a bond of $400,000 is set. And guess what happens?
She immediately goes to the Supreme Court to stay the charges.
Right. So she turns around and says, hey, they're not allowed to do this. But they do have an interesting point. So there's a special prosecutor that's been brought in. Her name is Lori White. Guess what her job used to be?
I don't know.
She was a legal representative for Calvin Duncan along the way in his travels.
Right.
So I guess we should talk a little bit about Calvin Duncan, what has happened to him in early life. So he's arrested for murder in New Orleans back in August of 1981. A 23-year-old man named David Yeager was fatally shot in a robbery. His 15-year-old girlfriend describes the killers as two young black men. One of the shooters is light-skinned and heavy-set and just under 6 feet tall, wearing a sun visor, like a visor cap. And then a week later, she said that the shooter was 5'8" and wearing a knit cap. And this is a big deal is made out of this. In February of 1982, Crime Stoppers is running a program about this, offering a $1,000 reward. And a young man named Calvin Duncan is accused. Yeager's girlfriend, so David Yeager, the person who's fatally shot in the robbery, his girlfriend is shown a photo of a Ray, and she picks out a mugshot of Calvin Duncan from when he was 14 years old, but says that she's not sure if it's him. Later, she changes it and says she was sure. Duncan is working on a Job Corps project in Mount Hood National Forest in Oregon. So he's not in New Orleans. The police, they've issued an arrest warrant. They named him in a TV broadcast. But a year later, August 1982, they arrest him. They charge him with David Yeager's murder. Oregon officers at the time, they write that the eyewitness was alleged to have been white, and this is the reason that they've arrested him. Only an involved person could possibly have known that this girl they're talking about was white. And the phrasing that was used that I've seen quoted, I don't know how accurate it is Duncan says, she must have been white or they wouldn't be trying so hard. So I don't think he's literally saying she's white. I think he's saying they wouldn't put forth the effort if the witness was African-American.
Not to mention, that's not that much of a guess.
Right, especially in New Orleans. So Duncan's attorney filed a request with the Orleans Parish District Attorney's Office, basically for discovery and for any exculpatory evidence. They get told, no, there's nothing that exists that's exculpatory. In 1983, the lead arresting officer from Oregon had pled guilty to illegally wiretapping a county official out there. In 1984, a New Orleans assistant prosecutor writes this in-house memo, and it points out the problems with the case against Duncan, the tentativeness of the identification in the first place, the felony conviction of the lead officer, and recommends that they make a plea bargain. So no plea bargain is brought forth, and these issues aren't really shared with the defense, which, as everyone in true crime would know, that would be a Brady violation in this day and age. Without other resources and only a ninth grade education, Calvin Duncan tried to prepare his own defense. He wrote a 1984 motion titled Motion for a Law Book and sent it to the Louisiana Supreme Court, which redirected it back to the New Orleans Fourth Circuit, which in turn redirected it to the trial court, and they sent him a copy of the Louisiana Code of Criminal Procedure. His girlfriend would copy case law from the Louisiana Supreme Court Law Library for him, and Duncan, he's working on this case, and his position is he didn't do this. And he says he fell in love with the law. So one of his first victories is he files an emergency lawsuit in Orleans Parish Prison about violation of the cruel and unusual punishment clause of the Eighth Amendment on behalf of older prisoners who had no teeth. He pointed out that the food that's coming in is tough and they have no teeth. And the sheriff agrees to settle this by giving them indentures. He was also known as being the Snickers lawyer because the fee for him to help prisoners as a jailhouse lawyer were candy bars. So he waits for trial for 3 years. The trial takes 1 day. Duncan was neither light-skinned nor heavy-set, as the witness had described. He had prominent gold teeth that the witness never mentioned. In her testimony, she answered a question saying it could have been he lost a lot of weight. The prosecutor's argument stressed how he had revealed facts about the murder that only someone could have known, specifically talking about her being white at a time, and that the eyewitness was always certain in her identification. They sort of ignored the fact that she didn't seem to know who was who in terms of the mugshots, and basically said she's sure and she's not sure at different times. But nevertheless, after this 1 day trial on January 29th, 1985, Calvin Duncan was convicted of first-degree murder, and his sentence was life without parole. In 1988, after spending 4 years in Orleans Parish Prison, he gets sent to Angola, which is Louisiana State Penitentiary. Angola was the slave plantation that used to be on the site of the prison, the land around it. The first task he was given was clearing cotton stalks left after harvest, which would have been a very similar task to what had happened on the plantation 120 years before this. The prisoners were mostly young black men working land while white men with guns looked on. So Duncan said having been sent to Angola was like going from hell to paradise for him, because there he was able to do what he wanted to do in the first place, and that is study the law. So he earns his GED. He becomes an inmate counsel substitute or jailhouse lawyer, a prisoner who is allowed to give legal assistance to prisoners. He helped several of them challenge their convictions, including Wilbur Rideau, who was freed in 2005 with Calvin Duncan's help. We called him the most brilliant legal mind in Angola, which is probably true, but I'm not 100% sure we should run with that too far. He taught a 2-hour law class to 35 inmates every Saturday morning for more than 15 years. Professional lawyers would go to him for advice. So Duncan could not help his own case, and like many inmates, he could not afford access to even his own case documents, which each page back then cost between $1 and $3. Records, as you and I both know, are almost always thousands of pages, even if they are one-day trial. I don't know how many times we read some. Do you remember the last time you read like a really short legal document?
No, never.
Yeah. So his only source of money at the time was 20 cents an hour for his prison job, and he would get payment for selling blood plasma. So with that money, he hired an investigator that he thought would help him. But the investigator took the money and did not do any work. So he files multiple petitions over the years for a new trial. He files writs of habeas corpus. All of them are denied. But his work inspired in 2001 the creation of the Innocence Project New Orleans. So that's a nonprofit law firm that is focusing on support for convicted inmates. There was a Tulane student there named Emily Bolton. She began gathering records for Duncan and other Angola inmates, and she formalized the project after she graduated. In 2003, the project took up Duncan's case, finding evidence that he was not guilty. They found that the eyewitness's description of the gunman differed from Duncan, that one of the Oregon interviewing detectives was convicted of a felony, and that he told Duncan the incriminating facts that they testified later he told. And I think the way this goes down is, he says, well, that little white girl down there said, and Duncan reiterates it and said, well, if she was white, I knew she was white, otherwise you wouldn't be paying this much attention to it. It took 8 more years, and Calvin Duncan is finally released from Angola January 7th, 2011, maintaining his innocence of the murder, but he ends up pleading to a manslaughter and attempted armed robbery in exchange for being released with time served. I think that ties into something you said earlier, which is...
It's really hard to hold out.
Right. He had been in prison for 28 and a half years at this point.
Hey, no judgment.
He had been a paralegal for 23 of those years. He worked with prisoners on death row for 19, and he taught law classes for 15 and GED classes for 7. When he leaves prison, he leaves with a check for $10 and his prison clothes, the shoes of which were so rotted that he ended up taking them off and carrying them. He still has that $10 check, by the way. So that's who we're talking about here, is somebody who like understands the other side of all of this. It's going to take till 2021 for Louisiana to change the law to allow persons who had pled guilty to challenge convictions. And this is only if they have evidence of their innocence. And on August 3rd, 2021, 2 days after the law took effect, Calvin Duncan's conviction was vacated, given the state's suppression of evidence, and the state dismissed the charges. Duncan says this was the second best day of his life, the very best day being the day he was released back in 2011. So that's Calvin Duncan. That's the person that we're talking about here, who's on sort of the opposing side of what's happening to Liz Murrill. Now, Liz Murrill, her case is stayed in the Louisiana Supreme Court, primarily because Lori White is involved, and Lori White was involved in the representation of Calvin Duncan. But this Guardian document popped up, and I have to talk about how they did this a little bit, at least. So the title of this article is "Louisiana Court Halts Criminal Indictment Against State Attorney General." So it says Louisiana's highest court has granted a stay of the proceedings in a criminal indictment targeting the state's attorney general in the latest twist of a high-stakes political battle between Republican state leaders and Democrats who govern its most famous city, New Orleans. Liz Murrill, a Republican who is Louisiana's first female attorney general, was slapped with a 16-count indictment on Thursday by a New Orleans grand jury charging her with intimidation and malfeasance. The charges effectively accused her of trying to intimidate New Orleans officials who fought a law passed by Republican legislators to overhaul the city courts. So she acted quickly for a stay on Thursday. The Louisiana Supreme Court granted it early on Friday, finding she had made a compelling argument concerning the disturbing defects in the grand jury proceedings and in the trial court's handling of those proceedings. The Attorney General had also called the charges against her retaliatory, meritless, and unconstitutional, writing on X that she would continue doing the job the people of Louisiana elected me to do. Separately, the state's Republican Governor Jeff Landry promised a swift pardon, saying that she would not have her reputation tarnished by a kangaroo court. The Supreme Court order resulting in Friday's stay says the case was meant to allow for her to assert any and all necessary defensive pleadings, including motions to quash. This stay shall not prevent the filing of a response on any pleadings filed by the Attorney General. The stay came a day after the announcement of the grand jury indictment, which was shrouded in secrecy. They always are. That's not all that interesting. News media members were waiting in the courtroom of the New Orleans Judge Leon Roche to hear the potential extraordinary return of the indictment. They were escorted. She was escorted out after he ordered the room sealed. The public has the legal right to access proceedings, and Louisiana law requires grand jury returns to be made in open court. So news outlet WWL Louisiana, which is a partner with The Guardian, they protested against the closure to try to maintain access to the courtroom in the event of an indictment against the Attorney General. An investigative producer for the station, Dante Monteverde, and the outlet's attorney, Elena Belzer, were subsequently handcuffed after the courtroom was emptied and locked. The pair, along with other media who were not handcuffed, had protested deputies' orders to leave the courthouse entirely. Roche at the time did not explain why he had sealed the courtroom. Local newspapers were reporting. Later, a statement from a court spokesperson said grand jurors must physically present when indictments are returned, and that confidentiality ensures their identities are protected so that they can deliberate freely, objectively, and without fear of public exposure. Nonetheless, Friday's stay said that by all accounts, the New Orleans court violated express provisions of state law requiring that grand jury returns occur in the public eye in open court. So Friday, the judge responds to the Supreme Court stay with a filing that asserted he had been justified in clearing his courtroom to preserve grand jurors' anonymity and that he didn't order anyone be handcuffed. The court never instructed deputies to remand or detain any members of the media. No members of the media were handcuffed inside the courtroom or in the court's presence. The sheriff's office, which provides security at the courthouse, said in a statement on Friday that its deputies acted in accordance with the directives they had received to protect grand jurors and other participants in the proceedings. What do you think of all this so far?
Well, they've got to pick. Either the return has to be made in open court, or the grand jury has to be has the right to remain confidential, right?
Yeah.
Those two. Now, it sounds like the return to be made in open court is like a statute, right?
Right.
That's what it sounds like to me. I don't know for sure. I think that most of the time nobody cares. That's why it doesn't matter, right?
Yeah.
Like nobody's like waiting for the return. So the judge is sort of in a pickle as far as that goes. I don't know. They need legislators to rectify that problem, right?
Oh,
So
100%. Yeah.
they've got to pick either, the jurors come back. Now, granted, the media should be required to respect the confidentiality of the grand jurors, right?
Yeah.
So that would mean they can't report on them, but if the court has to be open, it has to be open. The judge can't just arbitrarily and capriciously shut the court because this one time they don't want the grand jury to be exposed, right?
Yeah.
So, what is the problem here? Well, it's people talking out of both sides of their mouth, right?
Right.
Clearly, maybe they don't trust the media. Maybe they all know they're doing something wrong and that it's worth exposing, right?
Yeah.
Maybe there's absolutely nothing going on here. Who knows? But this all needs to be fixed in a way that isn't just about a judge closing the courtroom and putting a couple of people in handcuffs, right?
Right.
The law is the law. I don't even see how these two things exist, right? Except the only thing I can think of is it's just never been an issue before.
Yeah, and I think this is just a confluence of events that are quite interesting. So first of all, I've never covered Calvin Duncan in here because it doesn't have a resolution. So Calvin Duncan, even though technically has his case is done, he never received any kind of compensation. The governor's office, including Landry, have refused to acknowledge him as an exoneree, and that includes this attorney general who has been indicted here. So there could be something at play related to all of that. But I don't think that's the way you handle that particular issue, particularly if you're the attorney general saying you guys could face removals for protesting this other thing. Because one of the things that they're protesting is, so it kind of goes like this. The breakdown of what's happening is the mayor, the district attorney are being told they can lose their jobs if they oppose this law that eliminates a court clerk office that Calvin Duncan is currently occupying. So he has a job as a court clerk. And this law narrowed in and specifically abolished this position. So they protested it, which they're allowed to do. But then everybody started saying protesting the removal of that job would result in the people who are elected to positions being removed. Does that make sense?
Right. Except how can that happen?
Well, that's where we're at. That's how I think she was just running her mouth, and I don't think it could happen. I think they jumped the gun on this.
Well, right. And so, obviously she can say whatever she wants. That doesn't mean that she has the power to do it. In my experience, district attorneys and mayors are elected officials.
In most jurisdictions,
which means that they are, they serve at the pleasure of the people who have a vote, right?
Correct.
Meaning that no matter what the attorney general says is going to happen, it can't, because how would that even occur, right? So, I assume they're saying just the mere words spoken are criminal in nature. And they're going off of the fact that regardless of whether or not she could do it, she said it.
Right. And that's the part I think that's where they screwed up, is trying to indict her. And look, I'm not a supporter of either side here. I'm looking at it because I have questions about the process.
Well, sure.
Until she tried to remove them, I don't think they should have been trying to indict her. I think they're doing the same thing to her.
Well, and so to answer the whole situation, so you've got a situation where I guess I don't know where it was said, where she said, I'm going to remove them or whatever. or they'll be removed for supporting the objection of this job being removed, right?
Right.
And I assume they are lobbying more for the person than the position. Is that true? Or
I think it's actually like they're upset that the only thing we were able to give this guy is the court clerk office when he should have been recognized as an exoneree and compensated for the 28 years he spent in prison. And so, like, even cutting off that.
All of that is so far outside of the realm of elected officials' duty. Like, they eliminated a position, right?
Right.
I assume because somebody deemed it was the elimination of the position against the person?
I don't know that we know that yet in terms of what's been released because of how new all of this is. It also says they threatened 8 officials, but I don't know who all 8 officials are. I don't know the exchanges yet. I just wanted to start covering those.
Are they protesting him losing his job, or that they really need that position there in the building?
We don't know yet.
Okay. And so that matters, right?
I agree, yeah.
Okay, especially when you're talking about this specific situation.
Right.
I want to be clear about something, though. So, without anything else to go on, it is absolutely not the grand jury's job to work on indictments about something that was said by the Attorney General of the state.
Right.
I feel like they have 1,000% missed the boat in calling them in, presenting it, and the return of indictments. Okay.
I was trying to figure out, how do we get here? Like, who calls for this grand jury and appoints the special prosecutor?
It has to be the district attorney.
So you think the district attorney is doing this? And isn't that like some level of...
It's sabotage. It's using it to...
that's so weird.
Well, but here's my point, though. All the crimes that haven't been indicted in New Orleans, which
no kidding.
I assure you, there are plenty of things that people have done in violence towards others that haven't been successfully indicted. Okay. So unless all those things are cleared up, this should have never happened. It is just ludicrous the way that we have seen these idiots use their powers, and not even just in this case, but obviously the Attorney General of Louisiana is not a criminal. Do you really want to indict her for criminal charges? Do they realize how dumb they make themselves look just by throwing that out there?
I think both sides look dumb, though. I think if she threatened them or did something that
that's fine. I bet she doesn't do it again. But see, if she made I don't know if she just made a comment.
Yes. I'm with you on that. I mean, I think I know where you're headed.
If she's like, well, if they're going to fight this stupid premise, they shouldn't have their jobs, right? Okay.
Right.
Well, that's different, right? She's absolutely allowed to have that opinion. And how is it different that if she said, if you guys fight for that man to keep his job, y'all are going to lose your jobs, even though you're elected officials. And then they turn around and they say, well, you're an elected official and we can't do anything except criminally charge you, which is exactly what makes me think it had to have been the DA's office, right?
Right.
Okay. All of it's ridiculous. None of that should be happening at all. Okay. They shouldn't be trying to save an unnecessary job, because every elected official is a steward of the taxpayers' money. And the job is, I assume, a government job, and it's being eliminated for some sort of reason, right? Most of the time, jobs are eliminated when they can't afford them and they're disposable, right?
Yeah.
And so, all of that being said, none of that is a criminal matter.
Right.
Okay. And the fact that the Attorney General was able to immediately seek relief from the Supreme Court of Louisiana, and she received it, is exactly what's supposed to happen. Right now, It's just a stay. They didn't dismiss the charges. All they did was they put a halt on it. So essentially, that stops the arrest warrant. It stops the bond. It stops like a whole lot of the proceedings. And she will have to not be doing the duties of Attorney General and have to, in turn, be taking care of this, right?
Yeah.
Because she's going to have to, I don't know, get the indictments quashed, or she's going to have to address it. Okay. So in the meantime, whoever was responsible for calling the grand jury, making the presentation, and presenting the indictments, they aren't doing any of the other work they're supposed to be doing. Okay?
Right.
That's not happening. They are now having to deal with the fallout from the stay, right?
Right.
So that's wasting even more time, because it's not, they're mad about the stay, I'm sure. But obviously, if the court couldn't do it, they wouldn't have. Just like, whoever brought the grand jury in and got the indictments, they had the power to do it. They're just not supposed to.
Right.
Okay. And that's what is kind of bonkers to me, is it's almost like we've gotten to a point now where this targeted, criminal processing, it's almost like people have forgotten that even though I can indict a ham sandwich,
doesn't mean I should.
It is not the best use of resources to do so, right? And it makes you look like an idiot.
Yeah. I was going to put another story that dovetails with this on this episode, but I think we're going to have to wait. I think we're going to have to bring up the end of this on the next episode and then add that story to it.
Special consideration was given to True Crime Excess by LabrottieCreations.com. If you have a moment in your favorite app, please go on and give us a review or a 5-star rating. It helps us get noticed in the crowd. This is True Crime XS.
You fall like the stars. I break things like guitars. Thick skin, no scars. We're in trouble, we took it too far. I don't want to go, but it's 'cause I'll disappoint ya. It's all I've ever dreamed of, something I cannot let go of. I hate the competition, this culture's like a gym, and I lost the motivation to get fit in your expectations.
True Crime Excess is brought to you by John and Meg. It's written, produced, edited, and posted by John and Meg. You can always support True Crime Excess through Patreon.com, or if you have a story you'd like them to cover, you can reach them at TrueCrimeAccess.com. Thank you for joining us.